Thank you. Thank you for your prayer. I'm reading from Isaiah, or as the Aussies say, Isaiah. I don't know how they turn that A to an I, but that's what they do. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. And above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. So I said, Woe is me, for I am undone. I am undone. I'm a man of unclean lips. I dwell in the midst of people with unclean lips. My eyes have seen the Lord, the King of hosts, and I am undone. And so my talk this evening is called Done and Undone. So what does it mean to be undone? You know, when it comes to missions, we're doing a lot when it comes to missions. We're doing a lot. We are getting a lot done. But what does it mean to be undone? So in November, Mitch and I went to Nairobi. We preached for Pastor Don Matheny there at the Nairobi Lighthouse Church and did their missions conference. It was so wonderful. But we also got to gather our workers in Africa. We flew them all in to Nairobi for that weekend, all of our workers. And Dr. Sathine that you just saw on the screen from, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and all of those. And so we had our workers there, and we had them in a little beautiful retreat center for about 3 days. We looked after them, we took them out to dinner, we sat with them, we talked, and they were part of the conference. And to be honest, it's a lot cheaper to fly them all to Nairobi than it is to fly them all to Sydney, just saying. And so we had this wonderful time together, and we're talking, and basically what they're saying to Mitch and I is, just thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you. But then they started talking about, like, for example, that prison. So together, we feed 2,000 prisoners every day. That's over 750,000 meals. We've been doing this now for the last 2 years, I think. We've been doing this. It's a huge missions project. Before we started feeding those prisoners, 365 of them had starved to death. You understand, in those prisons in Africa, the government doesn't feed anybody. The government just locks you up, throws away the key, and half the time you haven't even been convicted. I'm talking the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so unless you have family that come and bring you food, you don't. So we began feeding these prisoners. That number, 365 last year, dropped to 16, but it was due to malaria and other things, but not malnutrition. And so, Dr. Salstein's thanking us, but then he says this. And of course, many of those prisoners, they've been in there for years, and they're still wearing the same clothes. No, the government doesn't provide uniforms. The government provides nothing. And all of a sudden, I'm going, man. And I'm thinking of a prisoner that's been in there for 3 years, 1,000 days, wearing exactly what she or he was wearing 3 years ago. And I start kind of hyperventilating. And I start getting really deep into a funk, and I'm thinking, God, there's so much need. And I started looking at Dr. Sathine, and I'm thinking, we're not doing anything. And he started saying, no, Pastor, no, don't think, no, you have no idea. You have no idea what you're doing. But I'm just thinking of the need that we're not even touching. And it was just, really wiping me out. And so then that afternoon we go to lunch with the Matheny family. And Rebecca, Alan, I believe, has been here. And Alan's wife, Rebecca, we're sitting around having lunch, and she starts telling us of a ministry they started supporting a couple years ago, a ministry that's been there that ministers to girls young girls who are pregnant through incest. There's a ministry to girls that are pregnant through incest. And they start telling me about this ministry, and I'm going, oh, no. I am already having a bad day. No. And we sat there for an hour, and for an hour, I told myself, don't do it, shut up, don't do it. And finally, after an hour, she's talking about these, and I finally said, well, let's go see. Bad mistake. Let's go see. And so she gets on the phone, and she arranged. They're in a very secure place, because when a girl is pregnant through incest, the baby is evidence of a crime, and so the baby's life is in danger. So they have to put them in a very guarded, secure location to save the children's lives. So Mitch and I and Don Matheny and Amy, we drive up to this little compound where this couple, just an African couple that loved the Lord, probably in their 50s, probably in their 60s, they started helping one girl some years ago she was running for her life. She was pregnant through her father, and they just began to help her. And the next thing you know, they got like 30 women like this, and they got kids. They've got girls now that have come through and gone all the way to college and have whole new lives, all that kind of stuff. But the couple are just so unassuming, just so regular. And they open the gate, and we walk in, and joy and laughter, and children are running everywhere. And this little 2-year-old boy runs up to me and wraps his little arms around my knees, and he's hugging me. He's got his little head on my knee, and he's hugging me. And I'm thinking, God, this kid has no idea why he's here. And there's this girl in the 6th grade, pregnant through incest. And so I'm thinking, Lord, I'm getting a lot done in missions, but am I allowing myself to be undone while I'm doing it? There's doing and there's undoing. Am I confident and comfortable doing missions? Or am I shaken and shattered at the plight of the forgotten and the forsaken? I'm not asking tonight, are you doing missions? I'm asking tonight, is missions undoing you? I think of Jesus and how he was undone. You know, when he approached Jerusalem, in Luke 13:34, he said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, but you were not willing." And then 5 chapters later, we read this in chapter 19 of Luke 40 and verse 41. As he drew near, he saw the city and he wept over it. He wept over it. Now, I'm going to read the rest of it, but I want you to understand that the word wept here in the Greek means to sob. It means to wail. The Greek word is to lament, like weeping from pain or grief. It's like hardly being able to say what you're trying to say because you are weeping and sobbing. And so he approaches the city, and now he weeps, he's sobbing. And here's what he's saying while he's sobbing. If you had known, even you, especially in this your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. I want you to hear him sobbing, saying this: for days will come when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you, and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground. And they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. And literally, 37 years later, the Roman army would completely demolish and obliterate the city. In 70 AD, Titus, who became Caesar, he besieged, he captured Jerusalem 37 years after the tears of Jesus. And he destroyed the city, he destroyed the Second Temple, and for his achievement, a monument, the Arch of Titus, was built. And if you've ever been to Rome, to this day, 2,000 years later, you can look and stand under the Arch of Titus. It was given, it commemorated his victory to this very day. And in it, you can see the plundering of Jerusalem. We see Jesus undone. We see Jesus undone in the Garden of Gethsemane. He prayed more fervently, Luke 22:44. And he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. Sometimes, before there can be great doing, there has to be great undoing. I saw this years ago in Brownsville, Pensacola, Florida, at the revival. I went 2 times in the 6 years of that revival. I flew from Sydney to Pensacola, Florida. 4.5 million people from 150 nations. And people would line up literally, in the early days, the days when I went, they would line up all night long. The meeting would last for hours. And as soon as the meeting was over, people would walk outside and stand in line until the next meeting the next night. And I was there. I needed God to do something for me because, we'd have church, good singing, good giving, everything was good, but nobody was getting saved. Nobody was getting saved. We hadn't baptized anybody in forever. And I thought, God, what is wrong with me? Please. And you know what? We'd have service. We'd have Sunday service. Nobody'd get saved. And we'd go to Sizzler and have a nice steak. And I'd go read the paper and have a little nap and go back for the evening service, and we'd do it all over again. Nobody was baptized. Nobody was being saved. We were all having fun, though. We had good church. Did you have a good day? Did you have a good day? Everybody have a good day? Did you get a word? Did you get a prophecy? Oh, this was good. This was church. And I'm pastoring a church where my city is perishing without Jesus, and it's almost like it doesn't really bother me that much. Scott, I'm trying to be honest, too. It's like, I wish it wasn't that way, but it isn't that way, so let's just keep. And I thought, this is not good enough, and I come that close to resigning out of the ministry because I felt like I was not a pastor worthy of the city that needed to be saved. And so I went to Pensacola, begged God to help me, break me, undo me. And you know what? It happened one night. I'll never forget this skinny 16-year-old kid, bony Maroney kid. He got up at the pulpit. Pastor Fitzpatrick had him stand up there, and he was talking about what God was doing in his high school. I think he was a sophomore. And he's talking about what God was doing in his high school. And this kid started crying for his high school. I'll never forget it. One of those great big old Assembly of God wooden oak pulpits, And this kid had his hands like this, And he started crying for his schoolmates. He started crying for his high school. Then he began to sob, and then it became ugly crying. And I got to tell you, God used that little 16-year-old kid to finally pierce something inside of me. And I'm telling you, I went home from that conference, and over the next 12 months, we had over 1,000 decisions for Christ in 1 year. There was a great doing in Pensacola because there was a great undoing for the unchurched and the unreached. A.W. Tozer said, before God can use a man greatly, he must first hurt him deeply. In other words, what Tozer said, undone often precedes done, and undoing is often the catalyst for doing. And we see this in the story of the Good Samaritan. You know, the priest and the Levite, we know the story. Remember the story of the Good Samaritan? A robber, this guy has been beaten and robbed, and he's left half dead. He's dying on the side of the road. And there he is. Everything's taken, his clothes. He's dying. He's probably half dead. And we know in this story, Jesus tells us this story. There's a priest and a Levite who are coming from Jerusalem back to Jericho. They have performed their duties. The priests, many priests lived in Jericho. They would go up to Jerusalem, perform their week up there, whatever it was, and then they would go back home. And so the priest and the Levite, when this guy's there on the side of the road, they pause and then they walk past. They pause and they walk past the man who had been brutally beaten and robbed and left for dead. They were not undone. They were just done. Church was over. They were done. Their duty was done. They'd brought their worship. They'd brought their sacrifice. And now they're on their way home. They were done. They were done with ministry. They were done with work, and they were on their way home to Jericho. But the Samaritan was undone. And in his undoing, he began doing what needed to be done. Jesus said in Luke 10 and verse 33, but a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. And these three words, when he saw him, he had compassion. You can't have compassion until you see. Compassion follows the seeing. When he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him, because that's what compassion does. Compassion is not a feeling and an emotion that I wish things were different. Compassion is a get up, stand up, go up, do something. Compassion moves me. Compassion moves me. Sentiment soothes me. So he went up, he bandaged his wounds, he pours oil and wine, sets him on his own animal, brings him to an inn, and he took care of him. But he had to see him first. He had to see him first. The priest and the Levite glanced at him, but the Samaritan saw him. Because the word in the Greek for saw literally means to behold. He beheld him. He beheld him. And then he had compassion on him. And compassion, according to Strong's Concordance, means to have bowels yearn, to be moved. Thayer says to be moved as to one's bowels. Like being punched in the guts is what it means. In other words, it's kind of like being undone. The priest was done. The Levite was done. The Samaritan was undone. And the undone got done what needed to be done. I think you would all agree with me this evening that the words that Christ followers live for, the words that every Christ follower longs for, the words that every Christ follower wants to hear more than any other words are the words, well done. We read in Matthew 25 and verse 21. Jesus says in this parable, his Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. But I think we may need to be undone before we're ever going to hear, well done. The Bible says that the Good Samaritan saw him. He didn't just notice him. He perceived him. He literally turned his eyes upon him while the priest and the Levite turned their eyes away from him. In Matthew 25, Jesus tells the story of the end of the age. It's coming. And all the nations are going to be gathered. It's coming. And he tells the story of all the nations categorized before him, sheep and goats. Sheep and goats. And to the sheep, he's going to say, enter into eternal life. But to the goats, he's going to say, depart from me. Now, you know what's so interesting? You know the question that those goats ask him? Because they're shocked. They're absolutely shocked. You know the question they asked Jesus as Jesus tells this story? The question is, when did we see you? See, the Samaritan saw him. The scribe and the Pharisee. When did we see you hungry? When did we see you thirsty, or naked, or sick, or in prison, or a stranger? To be undone, you have to see something. You have to see forgotten and forsaken prisoners who have been in prison for 3 or 4 or 5 years, literally wearing the exact same clothes that they were wearing when they came in 1,000 or 2,000 days ago. You have to see something. You have to see young girls, beautiful young girls. I spoke for a few moments to those 20 or 30 girls, all of them with their babies, some expecting babies, and I spoke to them on the beauty of the Lord that was on them. But you got to see something. And of course, while we were there, we saw the need. You realize all those girls and all those babies all shared one toilet. But not this year, because this year we're building them an entire toilet complex to bless and help them. And Don Matheny's building an entire shower block for those children and those girls. Come on, somebody. That's what we do. That's what we do. And on Christmas Day, we took up a special Christmas offering of $18,000, and we bought 2,220 some prisoners, all brand new clothes, and 300 women in the prison, all new dresses. Scott, we had a lady in our church, a beautiful lady. Her husband passed away not too long ago, very elegant. And she told me, she said, normally for myself, every Christmas, I buy myself a new Christmas dress. She said, this year, I'm not buying myself a new Christmas dress. I'm giving that money in the Christmas Day offering to help these prisoners who have been in these same clothes. And she has no idea that that offering she gave that day, instead of buying herself a dress in Sydney, probably bought 30 dresses for those girls, for some of those prisoners, women prisoners. I think maybe we all should go on a mission trip. Amen. I think we should go with our eyes open. And I think we should go. I think we should take our children with us. I think we should go on a mission trip. And I think we should go with a vulnerability and a willingness to be undone. It's just too easy for me to outsource my missions giving. To go online and just do it, get her done. I'm getting her done. I'm giving it. I've been giving it. Don't misunderstand what I'm going to say in my next statement. But Carol and I, we've been doing it for decades. Now, I didn't mean that. I don't know where that's error. That's all right. Yeah, all right. Let me just say that just ruined everything. What I was trying to say is that Carol and I personally give tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars every year in our missions giving. So there is doing, and then there is undoing. There is done, and then there is undone. And I don't want to just give to missions because I can. I want to give to missions because I must. I can is how I get it done. I must is how I do it undone. And I must is 10 times more powerful than I can. Yeah. You can do I can from complacency. You can do I can from convenience. You can do I can from comfort. But I must compels me and constrains me and arrests me. The Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 16, for if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast of, for necessity is laid upon me. Come on, somebody. These are some words that ought to go into some Christians' hearts and lives and lifestyles. For necessity is laid upon me. Yes, woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. Paul said he didn't just preach the gospel because he can. He said he preached the gospel because he must. He said, necessity is laid upon me. Maybe that's what's missing in the church today. Maybe that's what's missing in many Christian families today. Maybe that's what's missing in my life today. He said, necessity is laid upon me. We don't just do missions because we can. We do missions because we must, and necessity is laid upon us. Yeah. We don't just give to missions because we can. Because we have a plan and an idea and a concept. No. We give to missions because we must. We must show the mercies of Jesus. We must declare the gospel of grace. We must give the word that triggers everything. Repent. Yes, let's do it because we can. But even more, let's do it because we must. Let's not just have a missions conference because we can. And we're getting better at it. No, let's do it because we must. There is done and there is undone. There is doing and there is undoing. And this missions conference, let us expose our hearts to God and become vulnerable before Him. And let us reevaluate and reexamine and reconsider why we do missions, why we make faith promises. It's not how do we make a faith promise. Let's focus on why. Not how we bring an offering on Mission Sundays, why? Why we bring it on. Not how we fill out a faith promise, why? Why we fill out a faith promise. Why would we as a local church give half of our income to missions? And it's sort of like the old Harley Davidson t-shirt I used to wear. If you have to ask, you won't understand. Anybody ever see that t-shirt besides me? Harley Davidson. If you have to ask, you won't understand. Why would a church give half of its income away? If you have to ask, you won't understand. Would you stand with me? We're all gonna do something, and we know how. The how is written down right there. And you know what? We're going to get it done. We're going to get her done. We've been doing it now for years, Dan. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to get her done. But my challenge, this missions, and this is my personal challenge from God to me. And so if God puts it on me, I'm going to do my best to put it on you. And I'm not asking you if you're getting this done. I'm asking, are you doing this undone? And so I want to pray for you before I turn it back over to Pastor.